In Eastern Europe, it tended to be the case that people would trust their family over what they read in the newspaper because the newspaper was controlled by the party. Modern Americans are perhaps now grappling with the idea that, sometimes politicians are not honest and sometimes newspapers are not honest. It strikes me as a little bit naive. But then if you're a very successful society, you can afford to be naive. Naive in a way that less successful societies are often not. And this leads to the great forgetting that we see in the wake of functionality. In the wake of functionality, it's possible to take things for granted. And things are not to be taken for granted. Functional institutions are the exception. When things are working very, very well, you will have churches, you'll have companies, you'll have cities that will outperform their mediocre competition by orders of magnitude. These orders of magnitude are apparent when you look at something like the number of converts, the technologies introduced, the countries conquered. We can look at functionality from a morally neutral perspective. Functionality itself doesn't really have morality baked into it. It's more a neutral observation. It's an observation that the gears and the springs in this particular machine, in this particular hospital or prison or state function. They work, they fit together. The alternative to this often is that you can have an institution that on the surface is a company, on the surface is a church, on the surface is an institute, but the real story is that the humans involved are not coordinated and they don't know what they're doing. However, people are very good at imitating each other. So what happens is they have a simple group narrative. There's a simple group narrative that says, we are in fact a hospital or we are a startup. So we're going to drink the startup coffee and buy the startup laptops and, get the startup t-shirts, and the startup is still not going to work. It's very easy to have a tribal costume. It's very easy to say the right words. It's very easy to be, buddy-buddy with your friends and be really enthusiastic about the thing. But if no one put it together, that's still not a functional institution. Now, in an environment of plenty, an environment of a lot of capital or perhaps an overabundance of a certain kind of naivety, this sort of non-functioning institution can still be passed off as a success. But don't be for a second fooled. Fundamentally, somewhere in society, there are functional institutions making that non-viable organization viable. Institutions do function calls to the outside. We can think of civilization as, a complicated ecosystem where constantly functions are being outsourced from one institution, from one subculture to another. It has to bottom out somewhere, and in fact it does. And when those are eroded, we can have very serious problems.